Sir, I have failed to understand why people are born with physical disability. Are they born to suffer throughout their life? But why? Why? Why is an interesting question as well. I mean, one answer you can make is that it really doesn't matter why. I mean, it is the case that they're born with disabilities, no? The whole thing of karma is interesting, and it is important. But you have to understand, and this is something interesting here, because we always talk about how the Buddha taught karma. And then there are the Buddhists who claim that the Buddha didn't teach karma, but it was just because that was what the people in the society around him taught. I think that's a silly idea. Of course the Buddha believed in karma because of course it happens, because of course from life to life these things carry over. We don't really know how it works. We have the Buddha's words on how it works, and we have an idea, and the more we practice meditation, the clearer that idea becomes. Like, ooh, if I keep these mind states, there's gonna be a lot of suffering following it. And if I cultivate these mind states, and if I cultivate these tendencies, I'm going to suffer horribly because of these. But we don't really know, this person is born this way because of this, and this person is born that way, this is what they did in the past. You have to know exactly how experience works. You'd have to be able to see what's going on in their mind at every moment and see where that all came from, no? You have to see where their mind was when they died, and what they had done in their past life. It's a very difficult thing. The Buddha said no one can do it except a Buddha. But whether the Buddha taught this idea of past life, future life, or so on, what the Buddha was trying to impress upon people is the present moment. Adita nanwa kameya, don't go back to the past. Napatigang keya nagatang, don't worry about the future. Whatever comes up in the present moment, tata vipassati. What's in the past is gone, what's in the future is not come yet. See whatever arises clearly. Vipassati is the same word as vipassana. It means insight. See with insight that which arises in the present moment. So, one way to it's not really to answer it, but is to say, it is what it is. No, the question of why they're born that way is not so important, and the idea of it having some meaning or some purpose, or it having a why. The why is not so important. The question is what you're going to do with it. What you're going to get out of that life. Because in Buddhism we have no idea of. In fact, an important thing to mention is this idea of purpose. You think everything. We hear that everything happens for a purpose, and there must be some, meaning that there's a lesson to be learned. That you learn from these things, or these things kind of like are given to you by a deity. Of course, in deistic religions or theistic religions, there's the belief that these conditions were imposed upon us for some ulterior purpose. There's some greater purpose that we might learn something from. We don't have that in Buddhism. You are in charge of your destiny. You lead yourself to be born as a cripple. However you got there, you got there. That's where you are right now. A person who is born with physical disabilities has no one to blame but themselves. I don't know. I think people have a hard time hearing that, and they think, blaming the victim or so on like that. But, if you think of things scientifically, the universe is what it is. We have experience. Experience does exist, and our whole of reality is based on this experience. So what could our future come from except for our experience, right? Whether it is true that we're blaming the victims and victims of crimes and victims of great suffering, and we blame them saying, it's just their karma. It's not, because it's also the karma of the person inflicting the crimes. But we get ourselves into these situations. If we didn't act in a certain way, we wouldn't find ourselves in these situations. And this isn't fatalistic, because the most important thing is not how we got here or where we find ourselves or how we find ourselves. It's what we do with it and where we go from here. if you're a crippled person, maybe walking meditation isn't possible, but certainly the development of goodness is possible. There's the story of, what's his name? Mata Kundali, this boy who couldn't even raise his hands, even to pay respect to the Buddha. Even to do that much, don't talk about practicing meditation, but he'd never seen the Buddha before. And when he saw the Buddha, he had so much rapture in him that he just wanted to bow down to the Buddha and pay respect to him and learn from him. And so he thought this in his mind, homage to the Buddha, and he died. He was very, very sick. As a result of that, he was born in heaven. No, he was born as an angel. And he was, as a result, able to come back and listen to the Buddha's teaching and practice and become enlightened. I mean, this is a story. Whether you believe these kind of stories or not, or think that I'm just crazy to tell them, it expresses the point that is verifiable, that goodness comes from the mind and it can be performed at any moment in any circumstance. And so that's really... just followed a fly. That's really what we try to do in this life. We don't worry about our situation, or it's totally empowering for everyone, for a disabled person, for a person who is in a state of suffering, even a person who is in some form of slavery or hard labor, or who has great debt or so on. In the end, they can live their life out to its end and become enlightened in a way that leads them closer to enlightenment.
I would like to say that in Europe, people with physical disabilities or mental disabilities are not called handicapped or so. They are called now people with special needs. And I think that is very beautiful to put it. Because if you look at it without, how to say that? I think the suffering that many of those people have becomes because they are judged by others who are different. We, with 2 arms and 2 legs, moving them as we want, judge them and say, oh, they don't have that, they are different, they are disabled. But it's our judgment. They are in and of themselves perfect. And there are people without legs or without arms, and they still draw pictures and do things. And they are people with special needs who are very, very happy, living happy lives, living good lives, not suffering, because they are not judged by others. They are just supported in the way they are. And if they need to do things that they cannot do because they are different, then people help them instead of judging them. So I think we should think more of that, of like how we judge them and what we do with that to them, instead of just being natural to them and accept them as they really are, and help them if help is needed, and learn from them that life can be very good even if it's not perfect, even if body and mind are not perfect if we want it.
But if I can ask you a corollary question, what do you think of the fact that it's often karmic? Because there is one, I want to be very careful here, because I don't want to give the impression that we should have any kind of judging, but what you often see with people who have what you might call special needs is not all the time, and so this is why I want to be careful, but you will often see that they're unable to practice meditation because of some intense unwholesomeness that has led them to this state. I mean, what would you think of that idea? That there is something out of what is that? Out of whack? No, out whack. Something out there. No, especially in a person who has mental disabilities. No, is that it's not for the purpose of judging them, but I think probably the best part of that would be for a person who has these things to, yes, feel empowered, but to not feel overconfident and think, I'm perfect, no, I don't haven't, to give rise to this kind of feeling like, wow, because of my negligence, I've come to this situation, which I think, would only come to a person who believes in karma and past lives and so on, but can actually be beneficial because it helps you to give rise to this sense of urgency and the need to root out whatever it is that has brought you to that state. So just something to think about, not to take too seriously, because you don't want to look at people and say, oh, those people have bad karma or so on. But there is something there, no? Something that why they weren't born, why their experience led them to be born in a state that is obviously, out of whack, I think is the term. What do you have to say? You understand what I'm asking?
I do understand more or less. I have one experience long ago. I was preparing for a theater piece where I had to act a disabled girl with I think it's Down syndrome called. So I had to play that, and I went to a daycare center where people with special needs are spend their days, and afterwards in the evening would go back to their families. And there were some people with the Down syndrome, and for some month I worked with them. Not worked with them, that's wrong. I just visited them and spent time, and we played and so on. And they were so beautiful, so good, so really, really much better than they were angels. I don't know what to say. Maybe they are not able to meditate, but they could be still. We could have very, very silent moments together, and but probably there are other forms of mental illness which I haven't researched, where something of the bad past karma is left or so. I don't know, but I don't think that the person is really actually taking the bad into the next life. It's just maybe well,
I've had meditators who have disabilities in one way or another, and I just kind of get the feeling that there is something there can be something to watch out for. And I guess the idea would be, the only time I'd want to bring such a thing up is for all of us, because we all have disabilities, we all have things in our life, obstacles in our lives, and this should be, even if they don't bring it into their next life and have negative mind states because of it, it's still a reason for us to be clear that this sort of thing can arise in our experience. And if we come to understand reality as being based on what it is, really reality is experience, it is reality, then we realize that we have to be very careful with this, like an egg. If you are not careful, it will break. To be careful with our experience and to be quite meticulous about the cultivation of certain mind states, which can have, if you read in the suttas, it's just the smallest thing. The other thing that kind of, I would say, collaborates the idea is when people do suffer, they often, and not always, but they often do become better people because of it, because they see the potential, or because they've dealt with suffering and they know how to deal with suffering, and they become more patient, and they become more compassionate because they know what it means to suffer.
My niece, for example, was as a child had the tendency to be very sick. For suddenly it could just appear that she got very sick, and living in that danger to become very sick every moment and get fever so high that it really could be life-threatening, made her a very, very mature person who
helps you to let go, no?
So she is 17 now, and she is very, very special, very different from other people in
That's a very good
that
point.
age. So just to reconfirm what you said.